The first time I saw the cathedral arc blot out a sunrise, I was standing ankle-deep in a crimson ocean that foamed like beaten blood. Our survey shuttles were still unloading seismographs, and the planet, catalogued as Gliese 876G, was nothing but volcanic sand, poisonous wind, and continent-sized reefs of iron oxide. I was a secular xenogeologist then, more interested in tectonic plates than in liturgy. Yet the ark's arrival arrested me in a way no eclipse ever had. Its hull was not a hull at all, but a floating basilica. Spires upon spires, ribbed domes stacked like nested reliquaries, entire buttresses folding and expanding as if breathing. Between the gilded vaults glowed cyclopean speakers, their mouths big enough to swallow smaller freighters. And from those mouths came the first note, a subsonic hum so low it parted the ocean in a widening corridor, exposing a steaming trench of obsidian. I'd read about the congregation before, of course. Officially, they were a peripatetic faith collective specializing in missionary terraforming. Unofficially, they were feared the way one fears a black hole. Not because the hole is malicious, but because it obeys a physics larger than any plea for mercy. They traveled in a fleet of cathedral-class dreadnoughts, offering salvation to unclaimed worlds through what they called canticle engineering. Their hymns, sung by choirs genetically tuned to the resonance of matter, rearranged planetary crust the way a potter shapes clay. Where they landed, spires erupted, plains knelt into pews of metamorphic rock, and rivers split into cross-shaped deltas. By the time a planet took its first re-terraformed breath, it resembled an enormous place of worship, its entire biosphere inducted into devotion. My contract with the Exploration Bureau did not mention potential conflicts with roaming megachurches, and yet here the cathedral arc was, hovering above my research post, like fate given architecture. Most of my colleagues fell to their knees out of a melange of reverence and terror. I kept standing, perhaps because the scientist in me wanted data, or perhaps because I had already glimpsed my career vaporizing. The Ark did not recognize flagged territorial claims, nor did their doctrine allow for negotiation. They would hymn the planet, whether or not we left. The only choice offered was whether we cared to be transfigured alongside it. A skiff descended, silver, thurible-shaped, trailing incense that crackled into plasma at the atmospheric interface. From it emerged Cardinal Engineer Lucian Katos, a tall figure armored in white enamel plates, etched with scripture so fine it looked like frost. He carried no weapons, only a tuning fork the size of a scythe, and he walked across the still-parted ocean trench as though strolling a monastery cloister. When he reached us, he struck the fork against his breastplate. The note rippled through our bones. Sand vibrated up in helices and, right before my eyes, formed a perfect cubic pile, each grain aligning by some unseen choral geometry. "Peace," he said, voice amplified by the resonant aura of the fork. "The canticle commences at third hour. All sapients are invited to witness the transfiguration. Please clear 80 kilometers of terrain to mitigate incidental glorification." "Incidental what?" I asked, still staring at the impossible cube of sand. "Glorification," he repeated, patient as granite. "When non-terraformable matter cannot adapt to hymn alignment, it is sanctified into substrate. Inorganic observers are pulverized, organic ones become choir stone." He might as well have told me that anyone too close would be sculpted into ornamental masonry. I opened my mouth to object, wording a protest about scientific jurisdiction, UN colonial mandates, the right to exist unconverted. Yet nothing coherent crawled past my tongue. Behind me, waves slapped together, the trench reflooded, and the Cardinal turned back toward his skiff while issuing final instructions. "Third hour,
80 kilometers, blessed be. That night, I sat in the operations dome, frantically uploading petabytes of survey data to a relay buoy that had no guarantee of escaping the Ark's radius. The rest of the research team packed evacuation pods. I should have joined them. Instead, I found myself launching a rover in the opposite direction, toward the meditative storm of lights blooming beneath the cathedral arc. I told myself I needed samples of pre-canticle geology for comparison. Truth, I was seized by a morbid curiosity, a need to know whether him could truly translate stone into scripture. The rover crawled across dunes until the ark's underbelly filled the sky. My monitor displayed gravitational distortion like shimmering heat. And then, the first hymn of Genesis began. It started with silence so profound, it canceled the wind. Then came a choral breath, collective lungs inhaling across octaves my instruments couldn't measure. A single syllable followed, stretched to a minute, maybe an hour, maybe a lifetime. Time felt braided. The syllable acted like a tuning rod plunged into the mantle. Basalt cliffs convulsed, liquefied, and rose in rib vault shapes. Feldspar particles reoriented into mosaics whose tessellations matched prime number sequences. Where the hymn dwelled longest, matter thinned, until I saw through layers of lithosphere, as if it were stained glass illuminated from within. Seismographs shattered, but their last readings indicated vibration modes aligning with Fibonacci ratios, nature's own design commandeered into new denominational architecture. The planet responded like a drum, accepting the tempo of a master percussionist. I stared, rapt, until I realized my rover's titanium chassis was warping, petals of metal peeling outward. I commanded a retreat. Wheels spun, treads clanged. Back at camp, only half the evacuation pods had launched. The rest lay sanctified, conjoined into a chalice of fused alloys. 3 hours later, I stood in a field that yesterday had been barren, and today was a colonnade of basalt pillars, singing back faint echoes of the master hymn. In the distance, towers rose where no tectonic feasibility chart would allow. The ark hovered higher now, seemingly pleased, like an organist holding the final chord. Yet the transformation was incomplete. The planet's crust still quivered with residual harmonics. I thought, this is what aftershocks feel like when the quake is theological. Sleep was impossible. I wandered the newborn colonnade recording data, trying to stay rational. That was when I met Imri, one of the congregation's novitiate voicers. She looked human, though taller, with a resonance tattoo across her throat. Thin silver lines denoting frequency thresholds her vocal cords could produce. She addressed me by name, which I never gave, and offered water laced with something sweet that calmed the tremor in my nerves. "You should leave before the second hymn," she advised, sitting on a newly formed step of basalt that gleamed like obsidian, polished by centuries. "Is the second worse?" I asked. "Worse. Better. Those are secular adjectives. The second hymn compels organic adaptation. Flora becomes psalmwood. Fauna becomes choirstone. If you stay within range, you will survive, but never again as merely yourself." "And you?" I said. "What were you before?" Imri's smile was sad. "A linguistics student on Europa Colony. I volunteered for the choir. They tuned my larynx, augmented my lungs. The canticle welcomed me. I touched the basalt. It was warm, beating with a pulse slower than a glacier's drip, yet undeniably alive. Does any planet refuse? None. Some fracture, some erode, but every world listens. They're old, you see. Older than argument. They remember when sound birthed them. The logic twisted me in knots. How do you counter cosmology sung into the crust? I radioed my colleagues, urging acceleration of evacuation. The answer came, garbled. Interference spiked as the Ark's underspires began rotating, prepping for the second hymn. I made my choice then. I would not flee, but neither would I surrender. My scientific ethos, flimsy against doctrinal thunder, still suggested one leverage: resonance is mutable. If the choir modulated matter, then countermodulation might shield a region. I lacked time, but I had IATA. Seismic maps, mineral frequency signatures, sonic projectors meant for drilling. The planet itself could become a dampening chamber if I laid nodes along a tectonic fault. The plan sounded insane even to me, yet insanity seemed prerequisite for surviving a church that rewrote geology. I repurposed survey drones, programming them to embed harmonic disruptors along a 100-kilometer crescent encircling the last evac site. Each disruptor would broadcast an inverse wave, an acoustic negative, to cloak the zone in destructive interference. Ideally, the hymn would skip over the region like wind over a canyon's leeward face. Imri discovered my activity halfway through deployment. She hovered on anti-grav boots above a ravine, newly etched with angelic bas-relief. She could have alerted the Cardinal, an act that would doom not only me, but all who trusted my gamble. Instead, she watched, arms folded, until I finished calibrating the penultimate node. "You risk dissonance," she warned. "Dissonance breeds schism. Schism births void." I straightened, sweat freezing on my collar. "Better schism than choirstone." She tilted her head, listening to distant prelude chords stirring from the Ark. "My faith tells me to stop you, yet my memories, those still mine, envy your defiance. Very well, I will not intervene. But know this: should your shield hold, the canticle will adapt. It will learn your inverse waves, harmonize them, subsume them. You buy respite, not victory." "Respite is enough," I said. "Respite means people escape." Imri nodded and glided away, her silhouette swallowed by a glowing dust of airborne quartz that trickled from fresh minted archways. The second hymn began at dawn. No silence preluded it. Instead, a cascade of soprano overtones volleyed through the sky like morning birdsong magnified a millionfold. My disruptor nodes activated, emitting counter-oscillations. The overlap created a trembling zone, visible to the naked eye, air flickering as though split by heat mirage. Outside the zone, forests that hadn't existed yesterday sprouted alabaster trunks fluted like organ pipes. I saw a storm of butterflies swirl into patterns that froze mid-air, wings petrifying into stained glass mobiles. But inside the half-moon shield, sand stayed sand, and my lungs remained mine alone. The choir noticed. A formation of Candor drones descended, each one a mechanical seraph festooned with vocal arrays. They probed the shield, sang test notes, gauged our waveforms. I rerouted power, pushing the disruptors to thresholds that risked meltdown. The ground under my feet shuddered as interference nodes struggled against the planetary tenor. Metal screamed. Rocks exploded into shards, yet the barrier held. At the evac site, last shuttles lifted. I heard jubilant shouts across comms. I also heard the Candor drones shift pitch, discovering a harmonic slipstream where their notes could slither past my negatives. Chaos harmonics. They were using non-integer multiples, frequencies my disruptors couldn't perfectly cancel. The shield began to oscillate in patches. Basilisk-like vines burst through, growing meters in seconds, seeking any anchor. One wrapped a drone tower. The tower calcified, transformed into a pillar topped with a carved likeness of a kneeling saint, an effigy of the technician still inside. I sprinted to the central control rig, ripping out fuel rods to boost emission amplitude. Warning lights flared, Coolant hissed. The system would blow in minutes, but maybe minutes would suffice. Only one shuttle remained, mine, by rights. I keyed its remote launch, locking it on autopilot to chase the others. Empty. On a private channel, Imri's voice broke through. "You're alone now. Deactivate and come with me. There is honor in surrender. The Ark values courage. You may yet sing." I gazed at the sky where the cathedral hovered, sun backlit, haloed by vibrating debris. Honor in being transmuted? No. "Then your system will overload," she said softly. "And when it fails, the hymn will claim you." I thought of the crimson ocean, parted by the cardinal's note, and of sand assembling into cubes at his feet. I thought of the towers flowering like lit candles across a terrain that never consented. And I realized my defiance was never about saving myself. It was about telling the universe that consent mattered, even to planets. Over the comm I replied, "Let it claim me, but not on its terms." I opened the control rig's failsafe. Instead of a gradual shutdown, I set the emitters to catastrophic inversion. The nodes would implode into themselves, creating a momentary vacuum of sound, a null chord. If the canticle was a cosmic instrument, I would snap a string. Imri screamed, "Stop! A null will—" Too late. I pressed execute. The world inhaled, or perhaps forgot to breathe. All vibration ceased. Wind, blood, tectonic murmur, the very throb of thought. For a microsecond, matter contemplated silence. Then it spoke in thunder. A wave, not of sound but of anti-sound, radiated outward. The cantor drones fell, wings collapsing like paper. The hymn faltered, pitches sliding off keys, unresolved. Above, the cathedral arc groaned, its spires dimming, its underspires folding like a wounded bird retracting feathers. I was thrown meters, landing amid shards of what used to be a sonic projector. Heat seared my back. Equipment combusted. Yet the sky was quiet. Brokenly, wondrously quiet. Smoke cleared. The planet under the Ark's influence remained half-wrought, cathedrals unfinished, rivers mid-bend, mountains mid-kneel. But the transformation had stopped. Where my null chord had centered, a vast circle of terrain persisted unchanged, raw and primordial as yesterday. Sirens wailed aboard the cathedral. Repair drones buzzed. I expected retaliation, a third, harder hymn, to erase my blasphemy. Instead, a single shuttle detached and descended. White enamel, etched scripture, Cardinal Cathus returned, but where arrogance once buoyed him, fatigue had carved lines around his eyes. He strode across scorched earth to where I knelt, too spent to stand. Imri shadowed him, gaze conflicted. "You struck a chord never meant to be strummed," the Cardinal said. "A void chord. You risked unraveling not only our song, but the substratum of the sphere." "Yet it is still here," I rasped, "and its consent remains unanswered." He looked around at half-created monoliths. "You have forced a pause, scientist. Tradition dictates we do not proceed where global harmonics prove unstable. The choir will withdraw until the planet heals enough for a new attempt. That may take centuries." "Or never," I said. "Possibly." He inclined his head in unexpected respect. "Your act is remembered, but know this. The canticle is infinite in patience. Worlds age, stone forgets. Hymns remember. One day the choir will return. I'll be long dead," I said, "but perhaps the next custodian of this planet will also say no, and the next, until your patience meets ours." The Cardinal turned away. Faith walks on longer legs than science. He gestured to Imri. "Come." Imri paused before following. She crouched beside me, placing a vial in my hand. Crystal, humming faintly. "A seed of choir stone," she whispered. "Study it. Understand us.
Maybe next time consent will be informed. She left, the cathedral ark's thrusters ignited, lifting the basilica back toward orbit, its spires dim but not extinguished. I watched until it shrank into a mote among stars. Days later, rescue frigates arrived to collect the few of us who survived. They asked what happened, why half the planet looked like a sculptor's abandoned dream. I gave them data, seismographs, audio logs, my own bruised testimony. But late at night, alone, I examined Imri's vial. Inside, the choir stone pulsed with miniature harmonics, a choir compressed to marble. I wondered if planets felt as I did now, ruptured, relieved, yet haunted by a tune that almost became destiny. In the void left by the departing ark, I sensed possibility. That sound can create, and therefore, with equal grace, listen. Perhaps one day the congregation would return, but by then we might greet them not with weapons, nor with null chords, but with a counter-hymn taught to us by the very worlds we swore to protect. A song of consent, sung by scientists, settlers, and planets alike, vibrating the cosmos into a harmony of chosen voices.